I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either gonna be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
The site ran for about 1,000 years, from 11,600 years ago to about 10,600 years ago. During that time, we see the fantastic elaboration of agriculture in Turkey. I asked Klaus Schmidt about that, and I said, do you think Göbekli Tepe had a part in that? He said, yes, absolutely. Göbekli Tepe was a center of innovation in some way. It was a place that people were called to, mobilized, and taught new stuff. The other thing he's telling me, pointing at the ground, is that what they've excavated is only a tiny portion of the whole site. They've been over the whole site with ground-penetrating radar, and at least 50 times as much still awaits excavation. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of giant megalithic pillars under the earth there, so goodness knows what else Göbekli Tepe has to teach us. But I don't believe for a moment that we're looking at a sudden, mysteriously precocious invention 7,000 years ahead of its time. I think what we're looking at is a transfer of technology. We're looking at the survivors of a lost civilization who already knew how to make megalithic architecture, who already understood agriculture, and who used this project to initiate the local population into their way of thinking. There are other Göbekli Tepe-type sites. This one, Karahan Tepe, is about 50 kilometers away, hasn't even been excavated yet. You can see the T-shaped pillars sticking out of the ground in a farmer's backyard. We cannot separate Göbekli Tepe from the mystery of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia because between two rivers. Those rivers are the Tigris and the Euphrates, and Göbekli Tepe lies right between the headwaters of those two rivers. So it's fascinating that Madeleine Danes recently found this piece from the Uruk V period of Sumer, where we actually do see a T-shaped pillar here, and another T-shaped pillar surrounded in a circle, and remnants of more on this broken side. Göbekli Tepe had been buried for thousands of years by 3,500 BC, but it suggests that something unknown was going on. There was some memory, some recollection of this time in the Sumerian period. And then, of course, from Sumer, we have these bearded figures. Often they wear a fish on their heads. They're the figures who bring civilization to Mesopotamia. They're associated particularly with an entity called Oannes. He and the 7 sages, the 7 Apkallu, are the bringers of wisdom to Sumer. And they all carry, as I've 1,000 times pointed out, these cute little man bags, of which some 3-dimensional versions have survived. Why are they carrying these bags? What do these bags symbolize? And why do we find the same bag in the hands of a figure identifying with the civilizing hero of ancient Mexico, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the bringer of civilization to Mexico? This is the earliest image of the feathered serpent, and lo and behold, the same man bag is found in his hand on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And those man bags turn up at Göbekli Tepe on the top of Pillar 43. The same bags are found there. But there we know they're 11,600 years old. I think that we're looking at the symbol of, let's call it a brotherhood, some kind of initiatory group who went around the world and used this as their symbol and who brought the gifts of civilization, as is told in so many myths. I'm going to divert for a moment to the city of Haran. Well worth a visit if you're ever in that area. Haran is an ancient city. It's associated directly with the time of the Old Testament. It's mentioned in the Bible. Ur and Abraham are very much associated with that time, and there are the pools of Abraham that you can still find in Haran today. So it's thought to be about 4,000 years old or thereabouts. But Haran had a temple of the moon, and the people of Haran were called the Sabians, and they were renowned in the ancient world for their study of the stars and their worship of the stars. Now, interestingly enough, at the temple of the moon in Haran, the symbol has survived. It's the crescent disk of the moon, the crescent moon and the disk of the sun. And exactly the same symbol is found at Göbekli Tepe, the disk of the sun and the crescent moon. But Göbekli Tepe is thousands of years older than Haran. The Temple of the Moon is gone now. We're not looking at the Temple of the Moon here. This is an Islamic mosque that was built in Haran in the 13th century. It has also fallen away, but the single remaining minaret is to this day referred to as the astronomical tower. And it turns out that the people of Haran, the Sabians, made a pilgrimage to Giza in Egypt every year, and that this pilgrimage had gone on for thousands of years, and that it continued right through into the 13th century of our era. The Sabians of Haran practiced a religion that Islam regarded as pagan, but for a very long period they were allowed to continue with that religion. An exception was made for them for some reason that we don't fully understand. Eventually, of course, Islam fell upon them, but during this time it's recorded that they made pilgrimages to Giza, and Salim Hassan speculates that these Sabians, if I guess rightly, had derived their name from the Egyptian word Sabah, star. Sabians were the followers of an ancient religion, worshippers of the hosts of heaven, the heavenly bodies. Whatever the origin of their name may have been, the fact remains that they fully recognized the pyramids as being monuments connected with the stellar cult. Now, if we go, there's Giza, and let's remind ourselves about the incredible precision of Giza, the placement of the pyramid on a non-random latitude, 30 degrees north, 1/3 of the way between the equator and the North Pole. It's almost perfect alignment to true north. It speaks to the earth in lots and lots of ways. The Great Pyramid that was the object of the Sabian pilgrimage. It is undoubtedly a mathematical scale model of a hemisphere of the earth. Robert has talked about this as well. Egyptologists know this, but they say it's a coincidence. It's one of those coincidence pigeons. It's a total coincidence that if you take the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by 43,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth. And if you measure the base perimeter and multiply it by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. It's incredibly precise for it to be a coincidence. And it turns out that the scale isn't random. The scale is meaningful. If the scale were 1 to 57,803, I wouldn't be so impressed. But the scale is 1 to 43,200, and 43,200 belongs to a sequence of numbers that are found in ancient myths and in architecture all around the world. And that sequence of numbers is thought to be generated by a key motion of the Earth itself, which I'm modeling with this GIF here. We all know we have a pole star. The pole star is the star that the extended north pole of the Earth points most directly at. And in our time, it's called Polaris. It hasn't always been Polaris because of this. At times, the extended north pole of the Earth has pointed at empty space, and at other times it's pointed at different stars. Thuban in Draco, for example, not Polaris. The other effect of precession is witnessed on the horizon, and it concerns the background constellation against which the sun is seen to rise on the spring equinox. What constellation is lying on the horizon where the sun will rise due east on the spring equinox? In our time, it's the constellation of Pisces, has been for the last 2,000 plus years. Not an accident that the fish was the symbol of the early Christians. Constellation of Pisces, but we do live in the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And that is caused by precession. Gradually, the equinoctial sun is moving out of Pisces and moving into Aquarius. And the full movement will be complete within the next 100 years. Some people think we're already there. This process, whether it's at the pole or on the horizon, operates at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. 1 degree, that's a little movement. You hold up your finger to the horizon, that's 1 degree. That's what you need to observe in 72 years to understand this is happening. Obviously, to understand this process, you need to be passing down records for hundreds and hundreds of years. 1 degree every 72 years. 30 degrees, which is one house of the zodiac, in 2,160 years. That's 30 times 72. 360 degrees in 25,920 years. That is the great year. That's when everything comes back to where it started. That's the great return. That's the process of precession at work. And don't take my word for it. If you have the stamina, read Hamlet's Mill by Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Deschen, both professors of the history of science. He was a professor of history of science at MIT. And what they've done in Hamlet's Mill, I won't bore you with the details, but they've massively documented ancient knowledge of precession of the equinoxes and an obsession with those numbers generated by the number 72, and just an absolute obsession with those numbers, which is found all around the world thousands of years before the Greek astronomers are supposed to have discovered precession. So you can find it in the Vedic texts, you can find it in the Norse myths, you can find it in the story of Osiris, captured by Seth and his 72 assistants. And what Santillana and von Deschen do is they trace the origin of the system to some almost unbelievable ancestor civilization of prehistoric antiquity that first dared to understand the world as created according to number, measure, and weight. And that's why this can't be an accident, because the Great Pyramid's scale, the Pyramid-Earth ratio, is actually on a scale defined by a key motion of the Earth itself, by the precession. 72 times 600 gives you 43,200. So this is not a random scale, and this cannot be a coincidence. Santillana and von Deschen agree that the system is expressed not only in myth, but also in architecture. You find it all over the complex at Angkor in Cambodia, by the way. And although I don't have time to go into it here, Angkor in Cambodia lies exactly 72 degrees of longitude east of Giza in Egypt. That number, again, if you take 72 and add to it half of 72, you get 108. Divide 108 by 2 and you get 54. These are all part of the sequence of numbers generated by precession, and you can see it in architecture at Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And you can also see it at the Hoover Dam. At the Hoover Dam, Oscar Hansen incorporated a star map into the architecture of the Hoover Dam, and he does so quite specifically so that in remote ages to come, intelligent people with knowledge of precession would be able to discern the astronomical time of the dam's dedication. In other words, he knew that in 10,000 years, nobody might be able to read the English language, or inscriptions might not even last in the English language. But if they understood astronomy and they confronted that monumental work of architecture, they could say when it was created because of this star map. And the suggestion is, of course, that that's exactly the same thing that's happening at Giza, that Giza is stamping a date on the earth. The 3 great pyramids of Giza, and down here the Great Sphinx, gazing perfectly due east across the Nile Valley. It's interesting how tiny the Sphinx seems in context of this overall image. And yet the Sphinx is 270 feet long and 70 feet high, but it almost vanishes in the picture here. And there's the Sphinx complex with its 2 megalithic temples in front of it. The Sphinx, of course, is cut out of solid bedrock. And when the bedrock was removed, it was moved over here, cut up into 100-ton blocks and erected as these 2 megalithic temples. So if by chance the Sphinx is older than Egyptologists believe, then these megalithic temples are also older than Egyptologists believe. And indeed, the geology, and here Professor Robert Schoch has just done incredible and amazing, important work. He was first brought to the site by John Anthony West, good friend of mine and rogue Egyptologist. John Anthony West was convinced that the Sphinx bore the marks of water erosion, and he wanted a geological opinion. And Schoch, when he came to the site and saw these distinct erosions in the trench around the Sphinx, it was immediately clear to him that the Sphinx had been exposed to about 1,000 years of heavy rainfall, and no such rains have fallen in Egypt in the last 4,500 years. You have to go back actually to the Younger Dryas to get the rains that could have eroded the Sphinx. Archaeologists at the time were furious. There was huge opposition to the shock and West idea. And their main argument was, no, it's impossible. The Sphinx couldn't have been made 12,000 years ago because there's no other monumental site anywhere in the world that is 12,000 years old. And if a culture was capable of creating the Sphinx, surely it would have created other sites. Well, of course, they could say that in 1992. But with the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, they can't say that today. Here we have a site of very similar age that's being proposed to the Sphinx on a very similar scale, and it's not even that far away from Egypt. So there's our Sphinx gazing perfectly due east. And this is where you have to break the law. If you get up on the Sphinx's back illegally at the summer solstice, dawn on the summer solstice, you'll see the sun breaking the horizon over here. Dawn on the winter solstice, the sun breaks the horizon over here, far to the south of east. But you get up there at dawn on the spring equinox, the 21st of March, and you discover what the Sphinx is made for. The Sphinx is gazing directly at the rising sun, and the Sphinx's purpose is to marry heaven and earth on that special day, to lock it to that moment and that time frame. So the question is, what is the Sphinx looking at? It's looking at the rising sun, but what about the constellation behind the sun? If the Sphinx was made in 2500 BC, as we're told, it should have been made in the shape of a bull, because it was the constellation of Taurus that lay behind the sun during the Pyramid Age on the equinox. If your objective is to create a monument that's looking at itself in the sky, you want a bull there, not a lion. But there is a lion constellation. And lo and behold, if you go back, as you saw this morning, if you go back to 10,500 BC, if you go back to the time of the Younger Dryas, you find that the Sphinx is gazing at a lion-bodied constellation in the sky, a constellation that even looks a lot like the Sphinx.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I noted that Leo is actually already over the horizon in this picture.
In this picture, this is an hour before dawn.
Oh, so it's not like a fixed place where it's rising.
Well, no, it's only going to rise there for 3 or 4 days. Then it's going to track away from due east.
So, like, when the sun comes up, it wouldn't be, like, perfectly, completely above.
Here's
Right.
an hour before dawn. The constellation is still visible in the sky. You're looking at a lion on the ground, looking at a lion in the sky. An hour later, as the sun breaks the horizon, Leo is higher. But now our attention turns to the south and what's happening here at that very moment. I'll come to that. So it's interesting that 12,500 years ago, an equinoctial marker should have been carved in the form of a lion, and we have this lion equinoctial marker, which geology already suggests is possibly 12,500 years old. They're the Great Pyramids, and this is the point now, that allow another hour to pass. Let the sun bisect the horizon. And what happens when you know your sky, it doesn't really matter if you can see the stars or not. Once you've worked it all out, as we can do with modern computers, you know what leads to the next thing. The rising of this means that will be there. And this is actually the fact that as the sun bisects the horizon, the constellation of Orion is lying exactly due south on the meridian. It's like the gears of a clock have clicked into place, and the constellation of Orion is in exactly the pattern of the pyramids on the ground, and that happens 12,500 years ago as well. So there's strong astronomy, both the Sphinx and the pyramids, that are speaking to the age of 12,500 years ago. Now let's return to the Sabians of Haran and their mysterious pilgrimage to Giza. The Sabians were renowned as geometers, as earth measurers, and as astronomers. And in these skills, they made particular use of right triangles. A right triangle is a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, has its sides in the dimensions 3, 4, and 5. It has a 90-degree angle here, which is the right angle. 36.87 is the acute angle, and 58.13 degrees is the other angle. That's true of all right triangles. So it's